All right, welcome back. Session 5. Moving forward, we talked about Reagan's fiscal policies. Some of the other things that took place during Reagan's presidency, while many were looking to Wall Street and the high rollers, this is when you have the movie like Wall Street coming out. Many turned a blind eye to the growing problem of homelessness and poor in our larger cities and small towns. While the Reagan administration was cutting back on welfare funding, cutting back on that welfare funding did very little to help the poor. It's also during this time that a new plague was starting to develop among homosexual men that actually crossed over and also affected heterosexuals. That would be acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS. The first AIDS case was reported in 1981. AIDS is transmitted through the blood. It attacks the immune system's cells, suppressing the body's resistance to resist infection. People that had HIV/AIDS in the United States in 1981 were 50,280. By the year 2000, it was 264,402 that had contracted AIDS or HIV at this time. So something else that President Reagan didn't really pay attention to was the importance or the virulence of this disease that we are finally looking like we are dealing with and being able to defeat, and that is AIDS. So Reagan's foreign policies are really what helped end the Cold War. So Reagan ran on the idea of rebuilding the American military and standing up to the Soviet Union. Reagan was a true conservative, and he didn't like the Soviet Union or communists. While he was in Hollywood, he was a red hunter during the McCarthy era, so he was one of those people that liked McCarthy and was looking for communists within the Hollywood establishment. He believed that there was a window of vulnerability that had weakened the United States. He basically heated up the Cold War by calling the Soviets immoral and irreligious. And he was tired of detente, and he was outraged by the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. So what he wanted to do is he basically doubled the defense budget from $142 billion to $273 billion, strengthened both conventional and nuclear forces, and added new weapons to our arsenal, like the neutron bomb. If you want to see it like that, basically it's a microwave bomb, cooks everything that is organic materials but does not destroy the city. The MX missile, a new intercontinental ballistic missile, chemical warfare, and also he looked to rebuild the Navy. Reagan proposed boosting defense spending on the belief that he could cripple the Soviet economy because, unlike our economy, which is capitalistic, theirs was communistic, and they could not keep up with our spending on defense budgets. So his crown jewel of this proposal was a futuristic orbital space defense system, which he called the Strategic Defense Initiative, or its name that they got was Star Wars. The plan was to build missile-destroying lasers on satellites based in space. Most experts said it would never work. Reagan hoped that the Soviets, this new missile defense system, would force the Soviets to the bargaining table on America's terms. The Reagan Doctrine, which he adopted, the Reagan Doctrine stated that the U.S. had to combat any Marxist revolutions abroad to counter Soviet advances. The doctrine was used several times in Latin American countries, like Nicaragua, where the Congress Contras were fighting the Marxist Sandinistas. The Reagan Doctrine was Reagan's foreign policy. It ended détente and revived the policy of containment. The United States would do whatever it had to do to contain communism. In hoping to prevent a Vietnam-type war in Nicaragua, Congress passes the Boland Amendment in 1983, which banned the U.S. government from further assisting Contras with either troops or money. In November of '86, Reagan confirmed that the U.S. had secretly sold arms to Iran, an enemy. Then he denied the purpose of the sale, which was to get the release of U.S. hostages that were being held in Lebanon. And later he admitted that it was an arms for hostages deal. It was later learned that a portion of the arms profits were diverted to finance Contra rebels fighting communist Sandinistas in Nicaragua. This is the Iran-Contra affair. This was part of Reagan's policy to contain communism. The administration supported the rebellion in Nicaragua, but Congress specifically prohibited aid to the Contras. The covert diversion of undisclosed armed profits was obviously unconstitutional and illegal. So you see there, 1985, a group of Israelis approached the National Security Advisor Robert McFarland, and they have a plan to influence Iran, or have Iran influence terrorists holding Americans captive in exchange, or in Lebanon in exchange for weapons. Secretary Shultz and Secretary of Defense Weinberger object to the plan, but Reagan agrees to it. Colonel North modifies a scheme to take some of that money and funnel it to the Contras. In November of '86, Reagan confirms the United States had secretly sold arms to the Contras. Oliver North was convicted on 3 criminal counts. John Poindexter, a member of the Security Council, was convicted on 5 counts for deceiving Congress, and Reagan never faced any charges of criminal wrongdoing. He was criticized, but he never faced the charges. So the fall of the Soviet Union. This is what Reagan was working towards most of his, if not all of his presidency. So whether it was Star Wars or Reagan increasing the defense budget, which quadrupled the U.S. national debt from $1 to $4 trillion, this costly gamble basically won the Cold War. The Soviet Union couldn't keep up. Their economy wasn't built for it. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became the new premier of the Soviet Union and offered ideas to the Soviet people like perestroika, which means restructuring, which was a program of liberal and political reforms, and also glasnost, openness in Russian, described how the secreted and closed USSR would now approach the people and the rest of the world. The plan was originally to do this slowly and convert the Soviet Union into a more capitalistic society. To switch to capitalism, Gorbachev had to reduce the amount of money he was spending on the military. He and Reagan met 4 different times for summits from 1985 to 1988. They signed the INF Treaty at the final summit in Washington, D.C., and removed all nuclear weapons from Europe, ending the Cold War. After Reagan was out of office, this is where you see the fall of the Soviet Union. Perestroika and glasnost actually didn't work fast enough for many of the Soviet people. Some of the hardline Soviets were not really happy with this new openness and changing, so they attempt to overthrow Gorbachev when he was not even in Moscow. Basically, Gorbachev is kind of in the Crimea when the military tries to take over Moscow. Boris Yeltsin, one of Gorbachev's followers, basically defends him while he is not there. The attempt to overthrow the government fails. Gorbachev disbands the Communist Party and steps down as the leader of the Soviet Union. Boris Yeltsin, the man who defended against the communists, becomes the new president of the Russian Republic, and the Soviet Union ceases to exist in 1991. So Reagan's foreign policy revived the theory of containment by declaring USSR an evil empire that had to be stopped. The Reagan Doctrine told the world that the United States would take action to prevent communist revolutions abroad and ended detente. They fought communism with money and troops in Grenada, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. The Star Wars program sought to outspend the Soviets and bring them to the peace table to prevent economic collapse. Reagan supported Gorbachev and his Glasnost and Perestroika reforms. He met with Gorbachev 4 times to reduce arms, especially nuclear arms. Signed the INF Treaty, which removed all Soviet warheads aimed at Western Europe, thus ending the Cold War. And as we come up on our election this coming Tuesday, we are once again going to make a choice of who's going to be our next president. And the way things are going currently, the United States seems like we haven't started, but it seems like we have entered a second Cold War now with the Russian people, or the Russian government, and former KGB handler and agent Vladimir Putin. So that wraps up session 5 of our look at American history. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure that you take a look at stuff on Blackboard like the APA guide, and to make sure that your papers are correct on your discussion boards. Make sure you answer the question, and as well as engage in debate with your other students in this class. And let me think. I can't really think of anything else. So I will be posting the PowerPoints so you can use those for your papers. Once again, these lectures are to be used as supplemental to your readings and videos that are posted on Blackboard, and also your readings out of your book. Hope you enjoyed the class. I know I enjoyed teaching it, and I hope this helps you understand where we are as a nation and where we're hopefully going. And just since we're doing this right before Election Day, make sure you get out there and vote. Thank you, and may you have a great time after this class is over. So we'll see you later.